Hey guys, what's up? Todd here. Today's question I think is a particularly interesting one, but before we get into it, quickly I do want to remind you, if you want your question answered, post it below because I get a lot of the questions for this channel from this channel. All right, today's question is this. Todd, what is your take on sexual marketplace value? Good question, perhaps a controversial one, but one I'm happy to answer. So the first thing I want to say as a little caveat is, as far as I know, sexual marketplace value, I don't know if it originated as a red pill concept or if it's just a concept that comes up a lot in red pill discussions, but I do want to let you know I don't read every single nuance of every red pill form or anything like that, so if I'm missing some little esoteric detail somewhere, please don't shoot me for it. I'm going based on my own understanding. I'm also going based on the decades of questions I've had in this area, so take it for what it's worth as far as that goes. And I will say sexual marketplace value, to my best of my understanding, is a model, right? It's a modeling of how a man or a woman's sort of value in the sexual marketplace varies with different variables. So how, as you get older, what happens to your sexual marketplace value? If you acquire wealth, if you get famous, if you're in better or worse shape, all those kind of things. And as a model, I think having a model for this is a good start. It's a good place to start. Because if you don't have some idea in your head of what makes you valuable, how are you going to pursue becoming more valuable, right? So I think that's valid, right? And a lot of the things are pretty intuitive and pretty obvious. I mean, most people understand that having more money is a more valuable state of being in the world than having less money, right? Money is better than poverty, if only for financial reasons. So money is good, right? Money helps. And being more healthy, so you're going to live a longer life, helps. But these things of specifically age, aside from just pure health factors, that starts to get a little bit interesting. And my issue with these is that they are a little deterministic. So a lot of people that follow this whole sexual marketplace value idea have this idea that like a woman's a good until she's like 28, and then she like falls off a cliff by 30, and then she's just useless to the world. Where this comes from is the fact that in the tribal environment where we evolved, most people didn't even live into their 30s, and many people didn't even live to their 20s, and a woman in having a child, it was a huge mortality risk. Nowadays, people are living to their 80s and their 100s. Women can safely have birth well into their 30s, no problem whatsoever. The death from childbirth is like minuscule compared to all of that, et cetera, et cetera. So we live in a very different environment than the one in which sexual marketplace value was established on an emotional level. That is a major issue with this model, is it completely and utterly discounts a woman's personality value, which is absolutely ridiculous, right? If you're going to have a long relationship with a woman, which I know a lot of red pill people are against that in general too. They're like, don't ever settle down with a woman or whatever. But if you are going to have any kind of a long relationship with a woman, and long could be 80 years or it could be 6 months or a year, you're going to have to interact with that person, and you're going to have to live with that person on a day-to-day basis, and you're going to have to get along with that person. You're going to have that person be a positive influence in your life. And I would argue that having that positive influence in your life and that synergy and that growth matters a little bit more nowadays in the modern environment where age isn't such a critical factor, even in terms of childbirth, than your girl being 1 year older or 1 year younger, or a few years older or younger, that sort of a thing. Right, so this very sort of like prescriptive, absolutist view that a woman's value is only physical is extremely sexist in my book, and discounts all kinds of things a woman can do outside of just her physical appearance that offer value and creates value for her. So I find it to be a bit sexist, and I find it to be very fatalistic. And same kind of thing for a man, right? A man's value is not entirely determined by his wealth. There are plenty of men who do not have a lot of wealth, who still have tons to offer to the world and tons to offer to women in various different ways. They could do it through more traditional value offers, such as social connections, resources, ambition, intelligence, competence, all those sorts of things. But they also can do a lot through the experience they're providing, because again, the world has changed. We evolved in a very harsh and brutal world where people died readily. We live now in a world where people live a long time and where the average has come up. If you look at socioeconomic growth over time, the lifestyle of kings in the past and sort of kings or the very powerful now has not changed nearly as tremendously as it has for the average person, right? Most of the luxuries that the very, very wealthy have now, they had back then, they just had it differently. Instead of having it through a computer, they had it through an army of slaves or similar to that, right? So that hasn't changed a lot. But for the average person that isn't relying on a huge population of people working for him, our way of life has improved dramatically, right? Now we have computers and cars and abundant food and even healthy food, and the ability to not worry about, we could support many children without them dying, et cetera, et cetera. So the life of the average man and average woman, average person, has evolved tremendously over time. The lives of the extremely elite haven't risen by as much proportionally. And so these value distinctions mean less today than they ever have in the past. Are they meaningless? No, they still mean a good deal, but they are way less meaningful than they used to be. And nowadays, most any average man can provide more than enough resources to keep what would have been making any woman happy in the evolutionary environment, right? And so this very survivalist, fatalistic, binary, like high value, low value distinction kind of way of looking at the world is no longer really as valid as it used to be. And there's a lot more to be, a lot more on personality, a lot more on chemistry, a lot more on two people having a good experience together. And the other thing that I think this model discounts a lot of times as used, it's not baked into the model, but the way people use the model, I think it discounts cooperation and growth. Like one of the big things that, from what I've seen people use this model to mean is, as a man, because your marketplace value is increasing with age, or at least staying level, and women's marketplace value is decreasing with age, that you should never settle down with a woman. And that assumes that the only value a woman can bring into your life is being hot and having good sex. That assumes that there is no value whatsoever to growing with a woman. Let me tell you a very quick story that is one of the most heartwarming stories that maybe I've ever heard. And it's a very short story. Is when I was playing poker, there was a guy who I played poker with. He was like I was in my 20s. He was probably in his middle or late 30s or something like that. And he was a very rich guy. He was a good poker player, but also was in the game because he had a lot of money. And he was a successful businessman. When he was starting his business, he was working out of a garage, and he was working like 16 hours a day, working so super crazy, and that's how he got very, very successful. But you know what? While he was there, who was working right by his side? His wife. I don't know if they were dating or married yet or whatever, but she was working right by his side, and they were building this business together, elbow to elbow, and they were working 16 hours a day, harder than he's ever worked his entire life. And he said not one single second of it felt like work because she was right there with him, and every single moment of it was a joy, right? So we're talking here about a woman who, being with him, being by his side, helped him to elevate his sexual marketplace value, which he didn't then go out and go try and use to go find a younger model. What they did is they built a connection, they built this synergistic relationship, and they both had a better life because of it. And every single day they got closer and more in love. And I find that to be a beautiful story. Now some red pill guy's like, oh, he got duped. She got old and now she doesn't look like she did back then. Well, he's one of the happiest people that I've ever met in my entire life. And he's successful. His life is generally wonderful. You can laugh at him all you want, but he's a pretty happy guy. He seems to have his life pretty well together as far as where I'm sitting. Right. And even, regardless of extreme examples one way or another, the point is that relationships should be based on synergy and growth and both people contributing and offering to the relationship, as opposed to this idea that you're constantly trading up and you're constantly living in fear of the girl trading up, right? Because that's how this model gets used. And not to say that that's an inherent problem with the model, because a model is just a model, right? A model is only as good as its assumptions, and it's only as good as its uses. But a lot of people take this idea of sexual marketplace value to mean that a woman's going to screw you over for a man of quote-unquote higher marketplace value the first second she gets a chance. There are tons of loyal and wonderful women in the world who will never cheat on a man. There are tons of women who will cheat on their man, absolutely, but there are tons who actually won't, right? And then also, there's this idea of one-upsmanship that you're just looking for that moment to leave your woman and trade her in for a younger one, only if it makes you happy. right? Honestly, only if that's what really makes you happy in life. And for most people, that's not the thing that's going to make you happiest in life. There may be some segment of people that are just purely hedonistic and that's all they care about is a woman's sex appeal. That does exist, I'm sure, somewhere out there. But for most men, what's going to make them happy is having a woman who is good looking and has good sex appeal, but who they also develop a connection with. So constantly looking to trade in and trade in and trade in is only going to make you unhappy. And in my experience, that's what I've seen in the pickup community. The guys who are super obsessed with beauty and only beauty, or physical appearance only, and sexual marketplace value only, and this very like dog eat dog trying to screw each other over and keep from being screwed over kind of way of living life, those people tend to be incredibly unhappy. Really ironic thing. The whole idea of sexual marketplace value, in theory, if you're looking for a more fertile woman, would be to have that person to raise kids with. Funny thing is, the guy who's constantly trading up and trading up and trading up, a lot of these guys, they either don't ever want to have kids or they get a vasectomy so they literally can't have kids. So what was the point of getting that more fertile woman who you could have like better, quote unquote, better kids with, right? More potentially like slightly more likely to survive and thrive on a purely biological level. That's what quote unquote better would be in that context, right? And then never even going and having kids and never even experiencing that. What is the point of that? Also, by the way, if you're talking about having kids, there's nature and then there's nurture, right? Would you rather have a kid that's like 1% genetically better? Again, genetically better being this very, dicey term, but I'm just using it to follow the model. But then who isn't raised in a loving household and doesn't have, parents who are looking after him or her and raising him to the absolute best? Or would you have that kid that is like, the woman was like, 6 months older when having him or her, but then actually he was raised in a loving household and had every advantage you could possibly have on that level? I pretty much guarantee you that second child is going to do a lot better on average than the first child, okay? So is the idea of sexual marketplace value a valid concept on some level? Yes. However, it's extremely skewed because what we instinctively view that way, like our emotions, did not evolve in the current time. And because most people who are big proponents of this model and most people who constantly go back to this model have this like hyper-rational, hyper-fatalistic way of looking at it that completely discounts the fact that we as humans are emotional creatures, and it completely discounts the idea that two people can share and offer and grow together. It's this very like 2 + 2 always equals 4 or less value, as opposed to thinking that sometimes the sum of the parts is greater than the parts themselves. Do I think there are good applications in the model? Yes. Do I think you should try and increase your marketplace value? If you're in the marketplace and actively looking, definitely I think that's a good idea. And it's good to be aware of what marketplace value is and how you're conveying things, yes. Is it good to be aware of female psychology? Absolutely yes. But is it good to take this model as the absolute truth? No. And in fact, the people that I know that do take this kind of model as absolute truth and kind of live by it absolutely tend to be incredibly unhappy and tend to actually do things that subtly actually decrease their value in other ways that they're not aware of as well. Hey guys, thanks for watching. In just a couple days, I'm going to be doing an event on the single biggest element in all of game, a little thing called value. Value Masterclass is a 2-day live interactive event where I'm going to go deeper on value than I ever have before, including what exactly is value, how do women perceive value, and therefore how can you convey it? And then we're going to go beyond to just conveying value to actually becoming a man of value in every single thing you do. For more information to sign up, go to the link below. Look forward to seeing you there.